So let's talk about running backs now. It's kind of a similar conversation with running backs in that there's a theme. The running backs that you've listed are, in a lot of cases, handcuffs. You're not finding starting running backs for the most part after pick 100. Maybe there are some guys that could take the job, but a lot of them really require an injury.
Well, can I ask one question? Because I know you said you had the rookies when you sent us your list, so I didn't list the rookies. I wasn't really looking for them. Where was Tracy in relation to Scadaboo? Because I know Dave put Scadaboo on the list.
Sure. So we're looking at Fantasy Pros consensus rankings. Tyrone Tracy is 86th.
Okay.
He is RB 28. Cam Scadaboo is 131st. He's RB 43.
Yeah, that's so much of a disparity that it's, I think, laughable right now.
You have to take Scadaboo there, you're saying.
Of course. Let somebody else take Tracy, and you just take the guy who might end up being the better of the two.
Yeah, right. I think, you look at like Jalen Wright is not going to just take the job from Devon Achane, right?
Mason's not going to, as much as I like him, he's not taking the job from Aaron Jones. It's going to be Aaron Jones probably getting hurt.
So Dave's got this list: Scadaboo, Guerendo, Jalen Wright, Bashal Tuten, Jaden Blue for Dallas, Sean Tucker in Tampa Bay, Jarquez Hunter for the Rams, Phil Maffa in Dallas. Jamie has Zach Charbonnet for Seattle, Jordan Mason for Minnesota. He also has Isaac Guerendo in San Francisco. That's one that we really like. And Ray Davis for Buffalo. So, I think for the most part, Dave, we're just talking handcuffs here, but what else are we looking for in late round running backs?
Obviously players that are going to play. And it's one thing to draft a handcuff. It's another thing to draft a handcuff that can still get 10 touches a game. And that's something that like Jordan Mason might do if Aaron Jones is fine. Okay. And what Jamie said doesn't happen. And Aaron Jones is still going to be in the role that he had last year. But Jordan Mason is not only going to be useful as a backup in fantasy, but if you're in a pinch, you need a flex, you could start him and you hope that he breaks a couple of long runs on the 10 touches per game that he would get. And I think that there's a handful, not that many, but a handful of running backs on both of our lists that qualify. I think Charbonnet is at the top of the list. I love that call because we've seen it. We've seen him work in tandem with Walker. And then we know that Walker isn't reliable to play 17 games. And when Charbonnet's gotten in there, he's been awesome for Seattle. And I might be able to make the argument that he's the more consistent option for what that offense is going to call for moving forward. So he's somebody that I love a lot. Mason's going to play, I think, around 10 touches per game. I think Scadaboo could end up starting the year playing around 10 touches per game, might have the short yardage role too, because he's such a bruiser. And then the second that Tyrone Tracy coughs up the football, Scadaboo could just take off. So I like him a lot as someone that could be a good late round steal at running back. But anything that a running back can do to not only be the guy behind the guy, but also play in tandem with the guy adds value for fantasy.
I agree, and that's why I like Tyjae Spears. But let me just play devil's advocate. Because Tyjae Spears really wasn't nearly as good as I wanted him to be last year. And if I look at, I was doing this math this morning, right? I looked at, there were 8 games that Spears played. He only played 12 games all year. One of them was without Tony Pollard. One of them, Tony Pollard left with an injury. Mm-hmm. And by the way, the one game without Tony Pollard was a great game for Tyjae Spears. He only scored 13.3 points, but he had 23 touches and over 100 total yards. Just didn't score a touchdown. But anyway, like there were 8 games that Tyjae Spears played with Pollard and with Spears not leaving with an injury. And in those games, he really wasn't very good. I mean, I don't have the fantasy points per game, but it was nothing to write home about. It was, a 51 catch pace. So a guy that you could maybe throw in there as a flex if you need it. But I guess my devil's advocate would be like, do I really care about a player who might score me 7-8 points in PPR if I need it in a pinch? Or should I just focus on a guy who has the most upside if the starter gets hurt? Maybe it's the same guy, right? Because you could definitely make that case for Spears. But
that's the point, to go after a running back that's the same guy.
Yeah, that would be great. But for example, Ray Davis might give me pretty much nothing on a weekly basis. But man, if James Cook gets hurt, Guerendo Yeah.
I think you're, again, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but that's kind of the way like I rank these guys. Like, Jalen Warren's in a much better spot than Isaac Guerendo, for example, because Jalen Warren's going to play. Tajay Spears is kind of similar to that. Like, if you're talking about just the handcuffs, like you have to be patient with them. And these are going to be guys that, unfortunately, when it gets to injuries on your own roster or bye weeks, you have to make some tough calls on, do you give up on that player, knowing like, okay, Isaac Guerendo is the one player on my team that's not doing anything. But my gosh, if something happens to McCaffrey, he could be a top 20 running back, a top 15 running back, So there's lots of scenarios that you have to play out when you draft these kind of guys, Braylon Allen and Ray Davis and Jalen Wright and these kind of guys that aren't going to do very much, but unfortunately may have league winning upside. It's not best ball, it's redraft. And that's why you have to make some of these decisions when you have a 5-person bench and you suffer these injuries at wide receiver or quarterback, and you can't play these guys because they're not doing anything. So the 7 points, I think that was the number you gave for Tajay Spears, PPR points, like you may need that.
I'm sorry, that wasn't anything. I don't know what he averaged.
I'm just saying, yeah,
throwing out a number.
yeah. The numbers you're attaching to those guys, if you're just looking at like, okay, I need a flex for this week because I don't want to cut these guys, then that's something you just might have to do, as opposed to maybe dropping him for a Jack Besh who has a good matchup, for the Raiders and has gotten a couple targets recently, or Keon Coleman or something like that, So it's a matter of just, your roster construction. But I think, again, if you're playing this out from a draft perspective, you're drafting these guys with, okay, McCaffrey played 4 games last year. Isaac Guerendo is going to be somebody that I'm heavily invested in. Dave, mentioned Charbonnet, what he did last year when, or really his entire career when Walker's missed time. Like, you want to hold on to those type of guys. Same thing, I think, for Jordan Mason, again, looking at the situation, so
Sure.
It's a matter of, again, the sliding scale on your bench, the sliding scale of what those guys are doing in relation to the starter on their own NFL team, and just some of the decisions that you're going to have to make throughout the course of the fantasy season.
And you always might want to veer toward running backs on teams that are going to score a lot of points. Just one of those simple factors that just makes sense. Would you rather have Tajay Spears on the Titans? It's a team that's not going to put up a lot of points. Or, Minnesota should put up some points. So Mason would be the comparison there.
I think
I'll give you, again, just the strategy that I had with this Fantasy Pros draft. It was a 2 running back, 2 receiver league with 2 flexes. And it was half PPR, but I drafted 4 receivers with my first 7 picks. And the receivers were Puka, Terry McLaurin, Cortland Sutton, and Jerry Jeudy. So I planned to play those 4 guys. And my running backs were Christian McCaffrey and Joe Mixon. And then, so looking at the backfield, it was, okay, who can maybe step in if I need it? So my running backs on the bench right now are Jalen Warren, Jordan Mason, Isaac Guerendo, and I think I may have taken a flyer on somebody else. But you see the way that I built this team. It was, okay, 2 high-end starters with making sure that I handcuffed. And I said this when I drafted McCaffrey, Joe Pisapia, one of the guests we have on, he's the host of that show. And he said, how do you feel about McCaffrey? I said, I'm going to make it a point to reach for, quote unquote, reach for Isaac Guerendo, which I did. It took him probably a round or 2 before I needed to, or would have gone otherwise, because I'm the McCaffrey manager. I want to lock up that backfield. You could say Jordan James may be the backup there, but again, the strategy was have the ability to use running backs as at flex,
Sure.
but more so don't need them. I don't need them if I don't have to play them, because that's the way I built that roster.
All right. So then within this discussion, who are some of the guys that you think could just become the starter for their team? I think Jaden Blue for Dallas is kind of, you think, yeah, Scadaboo.
I think he's got a shot.
I still think Tuten, despite the fumble and the situation there. I mean, you have a new regime coming in with 2 guys that, one in particular has struggled, or coming off season where he struggled in ETN. And I don't know if Bigsby's the type of running back that Liam Cohen's going to want to feature.
And maybe dark horse would be Charbonnet.
Yeah, it's a serious dark horse. I think the dark horse is Ray Davis if James Cook holds out.
Oh, yeah. Well, that could be.